Great music you need to know about. In this day and age, there are so many artists who are not known. In this article I will detail various artists, whether they are classic greats who impacted music and artists, the world over, and across generations. Like AC/DC Elvis Presley, Lynyrd Skynyrd. Or they are unique artists who create music that is uncommon in this time. Like Sabaton, Corpse Husband, or Wind Rose. This is not a top list, just a collection of singers and groups I want to talk about. The list will be alphabetical, but only so that I can reduce the risk of putting them into the article multiple times. Please excuse any mispronunciations by TTS. The English TTS has trouble with non-English words. But, if you watch Zentreya, you should be fine. As a result of YouTube's rules pertaining to links in descriptions, I will be adding site details to the video.
AC/DC are an Australian rock band, formed in Sydney in 1973. Their music has been variously described as hard rock, blues rock, and heavy metal, although the band calls it simply rock and roll. They are cited as a formative influence on the new wave of British heavy metal bands. The band was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2003, and have sold over 200 million records worldwide, making them one of the best-selling artists of all time. AC/DC were founded by brothers Angus on lead guitar, and Malcolm Young on rhythm guitar, with Colin Burgess on drums, Larry Van Cryt on bass guitar, and Dave Evans on lead vocals. They underwent several lineup changes before releasing their debut Australasian-only album, High Voltage, 1975. Membership stabilized after the release of Let There Be Rock, 1977, with the Young brothers, Phil Rudd on drums, Cliff Williams on bass guitar, and Bon Scott on lead vocals. 7 months after the release of Highway to Hell, 1979, Scott died of alcohol poisoning, and English singer Brian Johnson was then recruited as their new frontman. Their first album with Johnson, Back in Black, 1980, dedicated to Scott's memory, became the second best-selling album of all time. Their 8th studio album, For Those About to Rock, 1981, was their first album to reach #1 on the Billboard 200. Rudd was fired partway through the Flick of the Switch sessions in 1983, and was replaced by Simon Wright, who was replaced by Chris Slade 6 years later. AC/DC experienced a commercial resurgence in the early 1990s, with the release of album The Razor's Edge, 1990. It was their only record to feature Slade, as Rudd returned in 1994. Rudd has since recorded 5 more albums with the band, starting with Ballbreaker 1995. Their 15th studio album, Black Ice, was the second highest-selling record of 2008, and their highest chart peak since For Those About to Rock, eventually reaching #1 worldwide. AC/DC were formed in the Australian pop music scene of the early to mid-1970s, which is described as the third wave of rock music. Many local 1960s artists, the Easybeats, and the Masters Apprentices, had attempted to gain international recognition but achieved limited commercial success overseas, and disbanded after returning to Australia. Newer artists, and veterans of the 1960s beat boom, developed a variety of genres, which included a harder blues rock style dubbed pub rock. Popular Australian bands, Sherbet and Skyhooks, played mainstream pop, or adopted a glam rock approach. In November 1973, brothers Malcolm and Angus Young formed AC/DC in Sydney, with drummer Colin Burgess, from the Masters Apprentices, bass guitarist Larry Van Cryt, and vocalist Dave Evans. Earlier, Malcolm and Evans had been members of a band called Velvet Underground, not the American group of the same name, based in Newcastle for 2 years, and Angus started his own band called Tantrum. He would only jam with his friends. The Young brothers had joined Marcus Hook Roll Band, a studio-only band, in 1973, which provided their first recordings for their debut album, Tales of Old Grandaddy, 1974, although the pair left before it was issued. Before formation, Malcolm teamed with ex-Velvet Underground bass guitarist Mick Sheffizik and Burgess for his proposed group. Van Cryke took over from Sheffizik for bass guitar, then Evans responded to an ad in the Sydney Morning Herald, and then Angus joined after passing an audition. The band's logo was designed in 1977 by Gerard Huetar. It first appeared on the international version of Let There Be Rock. Upon formation, Malcolm and Angus developed the band's name after their sister Margaret pointed out the symbol AC/DC on the AC adapter of her sewing machine. A.C./D.C is an abbreviation for alternating current, direct current electricity. The brothers felt that this name symbolized the band's raw energy and the power-driven performances of their music. It is pronounced one letter at a time, though the band are colloquially known as Akka Dakka in Australia. The AC/DC band name is stylized with a lightning bolt separating the AC from DC, and has been used on all studio albums, except the international version of Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. Their logo was designed by American typographer Gerard Huetar in 1977, and first appeared on Let There Be Rock. Adam Baer of the Bulletin explained, its type font conveyed the sense of electricity implicit in their name. AC/DC's first official gig was at Checkers nightclub in Sydney, on the 31st of December, 1973. For about 18 months, most members of the band dressed in some form of glam or satin outfit. Angus tried various costumes, Zorro, a gorilla, and Superman. Their performances involved cover versions of the Rolling Stones, Chuck Berry, the Beatles, and smattering of old blues standards, while trialing some original songs. Angus first wore his characteristic school uniform stage outfit in April 1974 at Victoria Park, Sydney. The idea was Margaret's. He portrayed a boy straight from school to play his guitar. On stage, Evans was occasionally replaced on lead vocals by their first manager, Dennis Laughlin from Sherbet. In Paul Stenning's book AC/DC, Two Sides to Every Glory, he states that Evans and Laughlin were clashing, and as a consequence, other members developed bitter feelings towards Evans. The group recorded a session in January 1974 at EMI Studios in Sydney, with Vender and Young, George Young, and Harry Vender, as the producers. Both were former members of the Easybeats and Marcus Hook Roll Band. George is Angus and Malcolm's older brother. Several songs were recorded, including Can I Sit Next to You, Girl, Rocking in the Parlor, and an early version of Rock 'n' Roll Singer. A week after the session, Burgess was fired due to intoxication. He was unconscious during a performance. Subsequently, Van Cryke was replaced. His recorded bass lines for the January session were re-recorded by George. Their replacements, Neil Smith on bass guitar, and Noel Taylor on drums, lasted 6 weeks, replaced in turn by Rob Bailey and Peter Clack, respectively. The band signed with Albert Productions in June 1974. Can I Sit Next to You, Girl, backed with Rocking in the Parlor, taken from the January session, was released on the 22nd of July 1974 as the band's first single. The song reached the top 50 on Australia's Kent Music Report singles chart. The group had developed a strong live reputation by mid-1974, which resulted in a supporting slot on Lou Reed's national tour in August. During that tour, Malcolm switched to rhythm guitar, leaving Angus on lead guitar, the roles the two guitarists played from then on. During 1974, on the recommendation of Michael Chugg, veteran Melbourne promoter Michael Browning booked them to play at his club, the Hard Rock Cafe. He was not pleased with their glam rock image, and felt that Evans was the wrong singer, but he was impressed by the young brothers' guitar playing. Browning then received a call weeks after the Hard Rock gig from Malcolm. Laughlin had quit and they were stuck in Adelaide with no money. They hired Browning as their manager in November 1974, with the cooperation of George and Harry Vender. The young brothers decided to abandon their glam rock image. Instead, they pursued a pub rock sound. To this end, they agreed that Evans was no longer a suitable frontman. 1974–1976. Bon Scott joins. In September 1974, Bon Scott, a vocalist previously with the Valentines and Fraternity, joined AC/DC after his former bandmate Vince Lovegrove introduced him to George during their stopover in Adelaide in August. Scott worked as a chauffeur for the group until an audition promoted him to lead singer. Like the Young Brothers, Scott was born in Scotland, emigrated to Australia in his childhood, and had a passion for blues music. Scott also had experience as a songwriter and drummer. Their debut singles tracks were rewritten, and the vocals were re-recorded by Scott. With Scott's inclusion, their working-class style, boogie rock sound, and earthy humor fell into place, according to music journalist Ian McFarlane. Scott's first concert for AC/DC was on the 5th of October, 1974 at the Masonic Hall in Brighton-le-Sands, New South Wales. AC/DC recorded their first studio album, High Voltage, in November 1974, with Vanda and Young producing at Albert Studios in Sydney. Bailey and Clack were still in the band during its recording, but Clack played on only one track, and the rest were provided by session drummer Tony Currenty. George handled some bass parts, and later redid others. Recording sessions took 10 days, and were based on instrumentals written by the Young Brothers, with lyrics added by Scott. They relocated to Melbourne that month. Both Bailey and Clack were fired in January 1975. Paul Matters took over bass duties briefly before being fired in turn, and replaced temporarily by George or Malcolm for live duties. Matters had disagreements with the Young Brothers' decisions. Meanwhile, on drums, Ron Carpenter and Russell Coleman had brief tenures before Phil Rudd, from Buster Brown, joined in that month. Bass guitarist Mark Evans was enlisted in March 1975, setting the lineup which lasted 2 years. The band were scheduled to play at the 1975 Sunbury Pop Music Festival in January, however, they went home without performing following a physical altercation with the management and crew of headlining act Deep Purple. High Voltage was released exclusively in Australasia on the 17th of February 1975 via Albert Productions, EMI Music Australia, and reached the top 20 in Australia. It provided a single, their cover version of Big Joe Williams' Baby, Please Don't Go. McFarlane observed, their initial achievement was to take the raw energy of Aussie pub rock, extend its basic guidelines, serve it up to a teen bop countdown audience, and still reap the benefits of the live circuit by packing out the pubs. They released their second studio album TNT, in Australasia only. Its tracks were recorded with Evans and Rudd except for 2 tracks, which used Currenty and George. It peaked at number 2 in Australia, and the top 40 in New Zealand. Its second single, It's a Long Way to the Top, If You Wanna Rock and Roll, had a well-known promotional video made for the ABC TV pop music program Countdown, featuring the band miming the song on the back of a flatbed truck. The single reached the top 10 in Australia. The title track was issued as a single in March 1976, and includes the lyric, So Lock Up Your Daughter, which was modified into their first United Kingdom tour's name. 1976–1977. Initial success, and record deal. Browning sent promo material to contacts in London, which came to the attention of Phil Carson of Atlantic Records. AC/DC signed an international deal with Atlantic in 1976. On their arrival in London in April, their scheduled tour with Backstreet Crawler was cancelled due to the death of that group's guitarist, Paul Kossoff. As a result, AC/DC returned to playing smaller venues to build a local following until their label organized the Lock Up Your Daughters tour sponsored by Sounds magazine, starting in June 1976. At the time, punk rock was breaking, and came to dominate the pages of major British music weeklies, including NME and Melody Maker. AC/DC was sometimes identified with the punk rock movement by the British press, but they hated punk rock, believing it to be a passing fad. Browning wrote that it wasn't possible to even hold a conversation with AC/DC about punk without them getting totally pissed off. The first AC/DC album to have worldwide distribution was a 1976 combination of tracks taken from the High Voltage and TNT LPs. Also titled High Voltage, it was released through Atlantic in May 1976, eventually going on to sell over 3 million copies in the US by 2005. The track selection was heavily weighted towards the more recent TNT, including only 2 songs from their first LP. Their third studio album, Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, was released in September-November 1976, in both Australian and European versions. Track listings varied worldwide. The international version of the album included the TNT track Rocker, which had previously not been released internationally. The original Australian version included Jailbreak. This was later more readily available on the 1984 compilation Extended Play 74 Jailbreak, or as a live version on 1992's Live. Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap was not released in North America until the 2nd of April, 1981, by which time the band were at the peak of their popularity. After a brief tour of Sweden, they returned to London, where they set new attendance records during their residency at the Marquee. They continued to tour throughout Europe, and then Australia. In January 1977, they started recording their 4th studio album, Let There Be Rock. Early the same year, they returned to Britain, and began a European tour with Black Sabbath. While Scott and Ozzy Osbourne quickly became friends, other members of each group were less cordial. In one incident, Geezer Butler allegedly pulled a switchblade at Malcolm during their show in Sweden in April. Accounts of the incident differ, but AC/DC were taken off the rest of the tour. 1977-1980. Cliff Williams joins, and death of Bon Scott. In May 1977, Mark Evans was fired. This was due to musical differences and personality clashes with Angus. He was replaced on bass guitar by Cliff Williams, a former member of the UK bands Home and Bandit. Scott explained that Williams was more experienced, while Malcolm wanted a bass guitarist and backing vocalist. Evans' autobiography, Dirty Deeds, My Life Inside, Outside of AC/DC, released in 2011, predominantly dealt with his time in AC/DC. AC/DC's first American radio exposure was through Bill Bartlett at Jacksonville station WPDQ-FM, Wave FM in 1975. 2 years later, they played their first concert there, as a support act for Canadian group Moxie in Austin, Texas, on the 27th of July, 1977. From booking agent Doug Thaler of American Talent International, and the management of Leber Krebs, they experienced the country's stadium circuit, supporting rock acts Ted Nugent, Aerosmith, Kiss, Styx, UFO, and Blue Oyster Cult. They co-headlined with Cheap Trick. AC/DC released their 5th studio album, Powerage, on the 5th of May, 1978. The sole single from Powerage was Rock 'n' Roll Damnation. An appearance at the Apollo, Glasgow, during the Powerage tour, was recorded and released as If You Want Blood You've Got It. In 1979, the group recorded their 6th studio album, Highway to Hell, with producer Robert John Mudd Lang, which was issued on the 27th of July, 1979. It became their first album to reach the top 20, the Billboard 200, eventually peaking at number 17, and it propelled AC/DC into the top ranks of hard rock acts. Highway to Hell had lyrics that shifted away from flippant and comical towards more central rock themes, putting increased emphasis on backing vocals, but still featuring AC/DC's signature sound, loud, simple, pounding riffs, and grooving backbeats. In February 1980, the members began to work on their 7th studio album, Back in Black, with Scott on drums instead of vocals. On the 18th of February, Scott passed out in a car driven by his friend Alistair Kinnear, after a night of drinking at the Music Machine in Camden Town, London. According to police, Kinnear left Scott in the car overnight to sleep off the alcohol effects. Unable to wake Scott early on the evening of the 19th of February, Kinnear rushed him to King's College Hospital, Camberwell, where Scott was pronounced dead on arrival. The official cause of death was acute alcohol poisoning. Scott's family buried him in Fremantle, Western Australia, the area they emigrated to when he was a boy. 1980–1983. Brian Johnson joins and rebirth. Following Scott's death, the members briefly considered quitting. Scott's parents advised the members that he would have wanted them to carry on, so they decided to continue, and sought a new vocalist. Fat Lip vocalist Alan Fryer, X-Rick Wakeman vocalist Gary Pickford Hopkins, and the Easybeats singer Stevie Wright were touted by the press as possible replacements. Various other candidates were considered by the group, ex-Moxie member Buzz Sherman, who was unable to join due to voice issues, Slade vocalist Noddy Holder, and ex-Backstreet Crawler vocalist Terry Slessor. During their auditions, the group brought in ex-Geordie singer Brian Johnson, who impressed the group. Johnson sang Ike and Tina Turner's Nutbush City Limits, and then Whole Lotta Rosie, from Let There Be Rock. After they worked through the rest of the applicants in the following days, Johnson returned for a second audition. Angus later recalled that Scott himself had praised Johnson's singing. On the 29th of March, 1980, Malcolm offered Johnson a place in the band, much to the singer's surprise. Out of respect for Scott, the band wanted a vocalist who would not be an imitator. In addition to his distinctive voice, demeanor, and love of classic soul and blues music, the group were impressed by Johnson's engaging personality. Johnson was officially announced as the lead singer of AC/DC on the 1st of April. With Johnson, the group completed the songwriting previously began with Scott for Back in Black. Recording took place at Compass Point Studios in the Bahamas a few months after Scott's death. Produced by Lang, and recorded by Tony Platt, it became the second best-selling album of all time, and a hard rock landmark. Its singles are Hell's Bells, You Shook Me All Night Long, Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution, and the title track. The album peaked at number 1 in the UK, and number 4 in the US, where it spent 612 weeks on the Billboard 200 chart. It also reached the top spot in Australia, Canada, and France. AC/DC released their first theatrical concert film, AC/DC, Let There Be Rock, which was recorded on the 9th of December, 1979 in Paris, during their Highway to Hell tour on the 1st of September, 1980. It was produced and directed by Eric Dionysius and Eric Missler, and distributed by Warner Brothers. The band's 8th studio album, For Those About to Rock, We Salute You, was released on the 23rd of November, 1981. It was their first number 1 album on the Billboard 200, and it also reached the top 3 in Australia and Germany. It received mixed reviews from critics. 2 singles were issued, Let's Get It Up, and the title track, which peaked at number 13, and number 15 in the UK, respectively. 1983–1990. Lineup changes, and commercial decline. Instead of Lang, their 9th studio album, Flick of the Switch, was produced by the group's members themselves. It was a return to the rawness and simplicity of their early albums, but received mixed reviews, and was considered underdeveloped and unmemorable. One critic stated that they had made the same album 9 times. Flick of the Switch eventually reached number 4 on the UK charts, and the top 5 in Australia and Finland. AC/DC had minor success with the single, Guns for Hire, reaching number 84 on the Billboard Hot 100. Rudd has had long-term drug and alcohol addictions. His friendship with Malcolm had deteriorated, and eventually escalated into a physical confrontation, after which Rudd was fired partway through the flick of the switch sessions in mid-1983. Rudd was replaced by XA2Z drummer Simon Wright in July 1983, after they held over 700 auditions in the US and UK. Simon Kirke and Paul Thompson were two drummers who auditioned. The band's 10th studio album, Fly on the Wall, produced by the Young Brothers in 1985, was also regarded as uninspired and directionless. A concept music video of the same name featured the band at a bar, playing 5 of the album's 10 songs. In 1986, the group returned to the top 20 on singles charts with a made-for-radio, Who Made Who, reaching number 9 in Australia, and number 16 in the UK. The associated album Who Made Who is the soundtrack to Stephen King's film Maximum Overdrive. It brought together older hits, such as You Shook Me All Night Long, with a few new songs, the title track, and 2 instrumentals, DT, and Chase the Ace. In February 1988, both AC/DC and Vanda and Young were inducted into the Australian Recording Industry Association's inaugural Hall of Fame. The group's 11th studio album, Blow Up Your Video, released in 1988, was recorded at Studio Maravel in Lovelle, France, with Vanda and Young as producers. The group recorded 19 songs, choosing 10 for the final release. Though the album was later criticized for containing excessive filler, it was a commercial success. Blow Up Your Video reached number 2 on the UK charts, and Australia, AC/DC's highest position since Back in Black in 1980. It provided an Australian top 5 and UK top 20 single, Heatseeker, and That's the Way I Wanna Rock and Roll. The Blow Up Your Video World Tour began in February 1988 in Perth, Australia. In April, following live appearances across Europe, Malcolm announced that he was taking time off from the North American legs of the tour, principally to deal with his alcoholism. Angus and Malcolm's nephew, Stevie Young, temporarily replaced Malcolm on guitar. In 1989, Wright left the group to work on British heavy metal band Dio's 5th studio album, Lock Up the Wolves. He was replaced by drummer Chris Slade, who has played with ex-Thin Lizzy guitarist Gary Moore, before joining. Johnson was unavailable for several months, while finalizing his divorce, so the Young Brothers wrote all the songs for the next album, a practice they continued for all subsequent releases through Power Up in 2020. 1990–1999. Popularity regained. The band's 12th studio album, The Razor's Edge, was recorded in Vancouver, Canada, and was mixed and engineered by Mike Fraser, and produced by Bruce Fairbairn, who had previously worked with Aerosmith and Bon Jovi. Released on the 24th of September 1990, it was a major success for the band, reaching the top 3 in Australia, Canada, Finland, Germany, Switzerland, and the US. Its lead single, Thunderstruck, peaked at number 5 on Billboard's mainstream rock chart, number 4 on the ARIA singles chart, and number 13 on the OCC's UK singles chart. Its second single, Monotalks, peaked at number 23 on the Billboard Hot 100.98. By 2006, the album had achieved 5 platinum status in the US. Several shows on the 1991 Razor's Edge World Tour were recorded for the 1992 live album, AC/DC Live. It was produced by Fairbairn, and was called one of the best live albums of the 1990s by Barry Weber of AllMusic. AC/DC headlined the Monsters of Rock show during this tour, which was released as a video album, live at Donington, in 1992. During the tour, 3 fans were killed at a concert at the Salt Palace in Salt Lake City on the 18th of January, 1991, when they were crushed and fell to the floor at the beginning of the show. It took 26 minutes before venue security and group members understood the severity of the situation and halted the concert. AC/DC settled out of court with the victims' families. In September 1991, AC/DC performed in Moscow for the Monsters of Rock festival in front of 1.6 million people. It was the first open-air rock concert to be held in the former Soviet Union. AC/DC recorded Big Gun in 1993 for the soundtrack of Arnold Schwarzenegger's film Last Action Hero. Released as a single, it reached number 1 on the US mainstream rock chart, the band's first number 1 single on that chart. Pacific Gameworks proposed a beat-em-up video game for the Atari Jaguar CD in 1994, AC/DC, Defenders of Metal, which would have featured the group's crew. However, production never started. Angus and Malcolm invited Rudd to several jam sessions during 1994, he was eventually rehired due to Slade resigning. Recording began in October 1994 at Record Plant Studios in New York City. After 10 weeks of recording, they moved to Ocean Way Studios in Los Angeles in February 1995, and finished recording in May. On the 22nd of September, their 13th studio album, Ballbreaker, was released, which reached number 1 in Australia, Sweden, and Switzerland. In November 1997, a box set, Bonfire, was released. It contained 4 albums, a remastered version of Back in Black, Vaults, a disc with alternative takes, outtakes, and stray live cuts recorded with Scott, and 2 live albums, Live from the Atlantic Studios, and Let There Be Rock, the movie. Live from the Atlantic Studios was recorded on the 7th of December 1977 at the Atlantic Studios in New York. Let There Be Rock, the movie was a double album recorded in December 1979 at the Pavillon de Paris, and was the soundtrack of AC/DC, Let There Be Rock. 1999-2014. Popularity confirmed, and Black Ice. AC/DC recorded their 14th studio album, Stiff Upper Lip, in 1999, which was produced by George at the Warehouse Studio in Vancouver. Released in February 2000, it was better received by critics than Ballbreaker, but was considered lacking in new ideas. The title track was issued as a single in January 2000, which remained at number 1 on the US mainstream rock charts for 4 weeks. The other singles, Satellite Blues, and Safe in New York City, reached number 1, and number 7, respectively, on the same chart. The band signed a long-term, multi-album deal with Sony Music in December 2002, which issued their Remasters series. In 2003, the entire back catalogue, except Ballbreaker, and Stiff Upper Lip, was remastered and reissued. Ballbreaker and Stiff Upper Lip were reissued in the UK in 2004. Later in 2003, AC/DC were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. The band's 2003 lineup, Johnson, Williams, Rudd, Angus Young, and Malcolm Young, in addition to Scott, were the inductees. Notably, former bassist Mark Evans, who appeared on 4 albums in the 1970s, was initially announced as an inductee, but 6 weeks after the announcement, his inclusion was quietly omitted. The group performed at Molson Canadian Rocks for Toronto, supporting the Rolling Stones, with Rush and other artists, on the 30th of July 2003. The benefit concert assisted the city's tourism industry, which was negatively impacted by the 2003 severe acute respiratory syndrome outbreak. The audience of 450,000 set a record for the largest paid music event in Canadian history. The band came second in a list of Australia's highest-earning entertainers for 2005, and sixth in the following year. Verizon made all the albums, including the Live at Donington video, available for digital download in 2007. AC/DC released video compilations Family Jewels on the 28th of March 2005, and Plug Me In on the 16th of October 2007. No Bull, the director's cut, a newly edited, comprehensive Blu-ray and DVD of the band's July 1996 Plaza de Toros de Las Ventas concert in Madrid, Spain, was released on the 9th of September 2008. Black Ice, their 15th studio album, was released in Australia on the 18th of October 2008, and issued worldwide 2 days later. Produced by Brendan O'Brien, and mixed and engineered by Mike Fraser, its 15 tracks were their first studio recordings in 8 years. Like Stiff Upper Lip, it was recorded at the Warehouse Studio in Vancouver. It was sold in the US exclusively at Walmart, Sam's Club, and the band's official website. Black Ice reached number 1 in 29 countries, including Australia, the UK, and the US. Rock 'n' Roll Train, the album's first single, was released to radio on the 28th of August. The Black Ice World Tour was announced on the 11th of September 2008 and began on the 28th of October in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. It then concluded with its final show in Bilbao, Spain, on the 28th of June 2010, after 20 months in which the band went to 108 cities in over 28 countries, with an estimated total audience of over 4.9 million. On the 15th of September 2008, AC/DC Radio debuted on Sirius Channel 19, and XM Channel 53, which plays their music along with band member interviews. On the 29th of September 2009, the band announced a collection of studio and live rarities, Backtracks, which was released on the 10th of November as a 2 CD and DVD standard edition, or 3 CD, 2 DVD and LP deluxe edition box set. On the 4th of November, AC/DC were announced as the Business Review Weekly Top Australian Earner in Entertainment for 2009, with earnings of $105 million. This displaced the Wiggles from the number 1 spot for the first time in 4 years. On the 19th of April 2010, AC/DC released Iron Man 2, the soundtrack for the eponymous film, which compiled earlier tracks from the band's studio albums. The band headlined the Download Festival at Donington Park in June 2010. 3 concerts in December 2009 at the River Plate Stadium in Argentina were released on a video album, Live at River Plate via DVD on the 10th of May 2011. An exclusive single from the DVD, featuring the songs Shoot to Thrill and War Machine, was issued on Record Store Day, April 2011. AC/DC released their first live audio album in 20 years, Live at River Plate, on the 19th of November 2012. In June 2011, AC/DC reissued their concert film, AC/DC, Let There Be Rock, on DVD and Blu-ray. The entire catalogue, excluding TNT, and the Australian versions of High Voltage, Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap, and Let There Be Rock, became available on the iTunes Store the same day. At the conclusion of the Black Ice World Tour in 2010, Malcolm had been diagnosed with lung cancer. It was treated at an early stage, and surgery was successful with cancerous tissue removed. He also had an unspecified heart problem, and had a pacemaker fitted. 2014-2018. Malcolm Young retires, and hiatus. Malcolm became seriously ill in April 2014, and was unable to continue performing. Fans speculated that the group could disband. However, Johnson stated that despite Malcolm's absence, they would return to Vancouver to record their 16th studio album, Rock or Bust. In July, AC/DC announced that they had finished recording it, and that Stevie had replaced Malcolm in the studio. On the 23rd of September, AC/DC members confirmed that Malcolm had officially retired from performing. Malcolm's last show with the group had been on the 28th of June, 2010 in Bilbao, Spain. He died on the 18th of November, 2017 at the age of 64 due to his dementia. Rudd confirmed that there would be another AC/DC tour, and that they had no intention of retiring. On the 23rd of September, 2014, the band revealed that Rock or Bust, featuring 11 tracks, would be released on the 28th of November, as the first AC/DC album in the band's history without Malcolm on the recordings. Nevertheless, all its compositions were credited to Angus and Malcolm. The album reached number 1 in Australia, Canada, Germany, and the UK. The band also announced their supporting world tour, with Stevie as Malcolm's replacement. Rudd was charged with threatening to kill, possession of methamphetamine, and possession of cannabis following a police raid on his home on the 6th of November, 2014. AC/DC's members issued a statement clarifying that the tour promoting Rock or Bust would continue, but did not indicate whether or not Rudd would participate, or whether he was still a member. At a charity signing before the Grammy Awards, the band were photographed together with Slade. It was later confirmed that he had rejoined for the Grammys and tour. In April 2015, Rudd pleaded guilty to drug and threatening to kill charges. Shortly thereafter, the band's website showed that Rudd was replaced by Slade on drums. On the 9th of July 2015, Rudd was sentenced to 8 months of home detention. On the 7th of March 2016, the band announced that the final 10 dates of the Rock or Bust World Tour would be rescheduled as Johnson's doctors had ordered him to stop touring immediately. He risked complete deafness if he persisted. The 10 cancelled dates were to be rescheduled, likely with a guest vocalist later in the year, leaving Johnson's future in touring with the group uncertain. On the 16th of April 2016, Guns N' Roses frontman Axl Rose was announced as the lead vocalist for the remainder of their 2016 tour dates. Williams indicated he was leaving AC/DC during an interview with Gulf Shore Life's Jonathan Forrest on the 8th of July 2016. At the end of the Rock or Bust World Tour, he released a video statement confirming his departure. His last show with AC/DC before the hiatus was in Philadelphia on the 20th of September 2016. After completing the tour in 2016, AC/DC went on hiatus. George Young died on the 22nd of October 2017, aged 70. 2018 present. Reunion and Power Up. In August 2018, speculation grew that former members Johnson and Rudd were back working with the band. A fan living near the warehouse studio, Vancouver, claimed to have observed them in the outdoor area of the studio from an apartment window. Shortly afterwards, a photograph of Johnson with Williams at the gymnasium of the Living Shangri-La Hotel in Vancouver in December 2018 surfaced, indicating that Williams had also rejoined. AC/DC then confirmed on the 30th of September 2020 the return of Johnson, Rudd, and Williams to the lineup alongside Angus and Stevie, reuniting the Rock or Bust lineup. On the 28th of September 2020, the band updated their social media accounts, posting a teaser video, which led to speculation of their comeback. On the 1st of October, AC/DC released a snippet of their new song, Shot in the Dark. On the 7th of October, the band confirmed the upcoming release on the 13th of November of their next studio album, Power Up, and issued Shot in the Dark as its lead single from the album. The album's track listing was revealed on their website the same day. They had recorded it in August-September 2018 with O'Brien producing at the Warehouse Studio in Vancouver, with some tweaking in Los Angeles in 2019. AC/DC launched a dive bar on the 2nd of October 2023, located at Club 5 Bar in Indio, called the High Voltage Dive Bar. AC/DC performed a co-headlining act for the Power Trip Music Festival at the Empire Polo Club in Indio, California, on the 7th of October, which was their first show in 7 years, with Williams being part of the lineup after coming out of retirement, and American drummer Matt Larg, who had previously played for Snakeapit, and Alice Cooper, replacing Rudd. The band hinted at another tour to occur in 2024. The mayor of Munich, Dieter Reiter, confirmed that they had booked a show in the Olympic Stadium for the 12th of June 2024. Founding drummer Colin Burgess died on the 16th of December 2023, aged 77. On the 6th of February 2024, the band published a teaser on their social media accounts, showing the band's lightning bolt symbol flickering before the words, "Are you ready?" appear, and their song of the same name plays. This led to fans speculating that they would come back to touring after 8 years. On the 12th of February, the Power Up Tour was announced, with former Jane's Addiction bass guitarist Chris Chaney replacing Williams. The European leg of the tour began on the 17th of May, and concluded on the 17th of August, with American band The Pretty Reckless as their support act for all 24 performances. AC/DC reissued their entire catalog on gold vinyl for their 50th anniversary on the 15th of March, 1921 June, and the 27th of September, 2024, as part of the AC/DC 50 series. They have also reissued 2 Australasia-only albums, High Voltage, and TNT, only available at the High Voltage Dive Bar. On the 2nd of December 2024, the band announced a second leg of the Power Up Tour in North America for 13 shows, with The Pretty Reckless as their support act. In January 2025, news broke that the band's Burwood home on Burleigh Street had been demolished in December 2024 to make way for a large development project. The news sparked outrage from the band's followers and rock music fans in Australia and worldwide. Musical style. Aside from an early flirtation with glam rock, the group's sound and performance style are based on Australian pub rock. That style was pioneered by Lobby Lloyd of Billy Thorpe's early 1970s group, the Aztecs. For the majority of Malcolm's tenure in AC/DC, he used a Marshall Super Bass head to amplify his rhythm guitar while recording in the studio. During 1978 to 1980, Malcolm used a Marshall 2203 100-watt master volume head. Influences. AC/DC's influences include the Rolling Stones, Chuck Berry, Billy Thorpe, the Easybeats, and Vanda and Young. The impact of Australian pub rock on AC/DC was documented on ABC's Long Way to the Top. Genres. AC/DC's music has been variously described as hard rock, blues rock, and heavy metal, but they have referred to themselves as a rock and roll band, nothing more, nothing less. AC/DC will assert that they are not specifically a metal band. Their music, loud, hard, and guitar-driven, may best be described as hard rock. However, there are people who will say that they are indisputably metal. Therein lies the ongoing problem of categorization. While AC/DC has referenced the underworld, and they have given their listeners Highway to Hell, and Hell's Bells, their songs are constructed on straightforward major and minor power chords. They are not modally developed as are a good deal of heavy metal compositions. Their sound is loud and crisp, not muddy or down-tuned. Legacy. Several musicians have credited AC/DC for reasserting hard rock's popularity after it had ceded mainstream attention to other musical genres in the late 1970s. AC/DC's music was a formative influence on the new wave of British heavy metal bands that emerged in the late 1970s, such as Saxon and Definite Leopard, in part as a reaction to the decline of traditional early 1970s hard rock bands. In 2007, critics noted that AC/DC, along with Thin Lizzy, UFO, Scorpions, and Judas Priest, were among the second generation of rising stars ready to step into the breach as the old guard waned. Over the years, many prominent rock musicians have cited AC/DC as an influence, including Dave Mustaine of Megadeth, Josh Homme of Queens of the Stone Age and Kiss, Dave Grohl of Nirvana and Foo Fighters, Scott Ian of Anthrax, Eric Peterson of Testament, Dexter Holland of The Offspring, Brian Baker of Bad Religion, Minor Threat, Dag Nasty, and Junkyard, and bands such as Airborne, Metallica, Slayer, Exodus, The Cult, and The Living End. Australian acts formed in AC/DC's footsteps are Rose Tattoo, and The Angels. Chrissy Amphlett of Australian rockers Diviniles acknowledged Angus' schoolboy outfit as the inspiration for her performing in a schoolgirl's uniform. AC/DC and other artists ran afoul of the satanic panic of the 1980s. This general fear of modern hard rock and heavy metal was greatly increased in the band's case when serial killer Richard Ramirez was arrested. Ramirez, nicknamed the Night Stalker by the press, told police that Night Prowler from Highway to Hell had driven him to commit murder. Police also claimed that Ramirez was wearing an AC/DC shirt and left an AC/DC hat at one of the crime scenes. Accusations that AC/DC were devil worshippers were made, the lyrics of Night Prowler were analyzed, and some newspapers attempted to link Ramirez's Satanism with AC/DC's name, concluding that AC/DC stood for Antichrist/Devil's Child or Devil's Children. Lyrics assessment. Throughout the band's career, their songs have been criticized as simplistic, monotonous, deliberately lowbrow and sexist. Fans of the band have defended their music by highlighting its bawdy humor, while members of the group have generally been dismissive of claims that their songs are sexist, arguing that they are meant to be in jest. For the book Under My Thumb, Songs That Hate Women, and the Women Who Love Them, The Guardian arts critic Fiona Sturgis contributed an essay evaluating her love for AC/DC. While acknowledging she is a feminist, and that the band's music is problematic for her, she believed it would be daft as opposed to damaging for female listeners if they could understand the band to be a bunch of archly sex-obsessed idiots with sharp tunes and some seriously killer riffs. Despite the unpleasant sneering quality of Carrie Me Home's claims about a woman who ain't no lady, and the generally one-dimensional portrayals of women, Sturgis said songs such as Whole Lotta Rosie and You Shook Me All Night Long demonstrated that the female characters are also having a good time and are, more often than not, in the driving seat in sexual terms. It's the men who come over as passive and hopeless, or struck in the presence of sexual partners more experienced and adept than them. Awards and achievements. The band's first ever nomination at an award show was from the American Music Awards of 1982 for Favorite Pop/Rock Band/Duo/Group. In 1988, AC/DC were inducted into the ARIA Hall of Fame. The municipality of Leganés, near Madrid, named a street in honor of the band hailed AC/DC on the 22nd of March 2000. Malcolm and Angus attended the inauguration with many fans. The plaque had since been stolen numerous times, forcing the municipality of Leganés to begin selling replicas of the official street plaque. On the 1st of October 2004, a central Melbourne thoroughfare, Corporation Lane, was renamed AC/DC Lane in honor of the band. The City of Melbourne forbade the use of the / character in street names, so the four letters were combined. The lane is near Swanston Street, where, on the back of a truck, the band recorded their video for It's a Long Way to the Top, If You Wanna Rock and Roll. AC/DC were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame on the 10th of March, 2003. During the ceremony, the band performed Highway to Hell and You Shook Me All Night Long, with guest vocals provided by host Steven Tyler of Aerosmith. He described the band's power chords as the thunder from down under, that gives you the second most powerful surge that can flow through your body. During the acceptance speech, Johnson quoted their 1977 song, Let There Be Rock. In May 2003, the Young Brothers accepted a Ted Albert Award for Outstanding Service to Australian Music at the APRA Music Awards of 2003, during which Malcolm paid special tribute to Scott, who was also a recipient of the award. In 2003, Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Albums of All Time list included Back in Black at number 73, and Highway to Hell at number 199. They also ranked number 72 on the 100 Greatest Artists of All Time. In 2004, on their 500 Greatest Songs of All Time list, Rolling Stone included Back in Black at number 187, and Highway to Hell at number 254. They ranked number 4 on VH1's list of the 100 Greatest Artists of Hard Rock, and number 7 on MTV's Greatest Heavy Metal Band of All Time. They ranked number 23 on VH1's list of the 100 Greatest Artists of All Time in 2010. On the 20th of November 2015, the band were inducted into the Music Victoria Awards 10th Anniversary Hall of Fame. Angus offered a statement, in which he declared it was an absolute honor to be recognized in the 10th year of the Hall of Fame. They sold over 1.3 million CDs in the US during 2007. In 50 years of the band's career, they have sold over 200 million albums worldwide, and 84 million in the US, according to the Recording Industry Association of America, which AC/DC the fourth best-selling band in US history, and the eighth best-selling artist, selling more albums than Elton John and Mariah Carey. The RIAA also certified Back in Black as 27 Platinum, for 27 million in US sales, which made it the fourth best-selling album of all time in the US. Band members. Current members: Angus Young, lead guitar, occasional backing vocals. Stevie Young, rhythm guitar, backing vocals. Cliff Williams, bass guitar, backing vocals. Brian Johnson, lead vocals. Phil Rudd, drums. Touring musicians. Current touring musicians: Chris Chaney, bass guitar, backing vocals. Matt Larg, drums. Former touring musicians: George Young, bass guitar, rhythm guitar, drums, backing vocals. Dennis Laughlin, lead vocals. Axl Rose, lead vocals. Bruce Howe, bass guitar. Paul Gregg, bass guitar. Former members: Dave Evans, lead vocals. Bon Scott, lead vocals. Malcolm Young, rhythm guitar, backing vocals. Larry Van Kruyt, bass guitar. Neil Smith, bass guitar. Rob Bailey, bass. Paul Matters, bass guitar. Mark Evans, bass guitar. Colin Burgess, drums. Ron Carpenter, drums. Russell Coleman, drums. Noel Taylor, drums. Peter Clack, drums. Simon Wright, drums. Chris Slade, drums. Discography. Studio albums. High Voltage, 1975 Australasia only. TNT 1975. Australasia only. High voltage. 1976 international version. Dirty Deeds Done Dirt Cheap. 1976 Let There Be Rock. 1977 Powerage. 1978 Highway to Hell. 1979 Back in Black. 1980 For Those About to Rock We Salute You. 1981 Flick of the Switch. 1983 Fly on the Wall. 1985 Blow Up Your Video. 1988 The Razor's Edge. 1990 Ball Breaker. 1995 Stiff Upper Lip. 2000 Black Ice. 2008 Rock or Bust. 2014 Power Up. 2020